Steve Austin is a man broken mentally and physically. His only wish is to die, and he refused any help from Oscar and Rudy. And now Hull has forcefully taken a secret weapon away from North Korea that seemed to be real important to them. And he makes threats directed at Oscar, and whom we can assume Margaret. We still don't know what Hull's plan is. Still, the only question remains is who can stop him. Welcome, agents. Now we're in issue 4, and this one is titled Transformation. So now let's see what happens to Steve. A dog is walking through the hospital, and Oscar is walking in behind it. And a nurse sees the dog and she's not happy. She looks at Oscar and says, "What is that dog doing in here? This is a hospital." At that moment, Rudy walks up and says, "This dog is here on my authority, nurse." She says, "I don't care if the dog whisperer said he could come. Get it out of here now." But Rudy rebuts and says, "This animal is an important part of a depressed patient's therapy, so give us a break." So the nurse reluctantly says, "Well, if he craps, you're picking it up." And Oscar says, "I wouldn't dream of it, ma'am. I myself will pick it up." She says, "And who are you?" "I'm the man with the German Shepherd," Oscar says. The dog walks into Steve's room and approaches Steve. And he says, "Hey boy, who let you in here?" "He's with me," Oscar says as he and Rudy walk into the room. "Max is a big puppy, ain't you, boy?" Steve says, "What am I, 5 years old? You think bringing me a puppy will make everything okay?" Oscar replies, "He's a little big to be called a puppy." And Rudy adds that this is an extraordinary animal. He's trained in narcotics detection and disaster rescues. And Steve says, "And what, now he's my new pal? So what's so extraordinary about a drug doll? What's he going to do for me? Roll over and beg?" "He'll fetch your slippers," Oscar says jokingly. Steve doesn't crack a smile. He doesn't think it's funny. "Oh, come on, Steve, smile. That was funny." Steve says, "Take your dog and get out of here." Rudy walks up to Max and looks down at him and proceeds to tell the story behind Max. He says Max worked Border Patrol in San Diego. One day, a vandlord of a drug runner gets popped at the border thanks to Max here. He says weeks later, one of them is so mad that he breaks into the pen where Max is held, takes a crowbar to him and shatters all 4 of his legs, fractured his skull, broke most of his ribs, and snapped his spine, just mutilated the dog. The police finally got to the guy before he could kill Max, and I heard that they done a number on him too. So Steve is amazed. He says, "So how come..." "You're kidding. You're saying that this dog is artificial?" "Not artificial, Steve," Rudy says. "Cybernetic." And Oscar jumps in. "Bionic, Steve." "And very, very normal," Oscar says as the dog raises his leg and pees on the floor. Steve looks at the dog and looks up at Oscar and Rudy. "How long will it take?" Rudy says the procedure will last 42 hours. Recovery time is hard to pinpoint because the level of replacement we'll be doing has never been done before. "Where?" Steve says. "Will it be done here?" Oscar says our facility in Colorado is state-of-the-art. Fantastic view of the Rockies. "The moment it doesn't feel right," Steve says, "I'm out. You understand? If I start to feel like a guinea pig..." Oscar says, "Then we'll take you off the hamster wheel." Steve looks up at Oscar and for the first time gives a smile. Steve Austin is flown in by helicopter to the facility in Colorado. Oscar stands before the onlookers and addresses them. Gentlemen, Miss Carlyle, if I may have your attention. What you are about to witness is nothing short of a miracle of modern science. Colonel Steve Austin, a man barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology. We are going to recreate the world's first fully functional Bionic Man. Steve Austin will be that man. We'll make him better than he was before. Better, stronger, faster. The first step is to reinforce Colonel Austin's skeletal structure, particularly the spine. Dr. Killian's team has developed a polymer that allows steel reinforcement to be liquefied and injected into Colonel Austin's bones. It effectively replaces marrow with metal, allowing the alloy to reinforce the skeleton to withstand the weight and pressure Colonel Austin's new muscles will exert. Due to weight displacement ratios, the existing arm will be removed to compensate for the replacement arm. Each arm is fitted with its own power source. Dr. Killian's team has designed and manufactured multiple miniature generators, nuclear generators, that act as power cells for the limbs, allowing them to manipulate weights of up to 1 ton. Each leg can withstand an impact of up to 5 tons, allowing for landings that would shatter normal legs. Also, each is equipped with micro-miniaturized nuclear generators. The legs will function at 10 times the speed of the average athlete. While Colonel Austin's brain will control the limbs as if they were his own, they draw their own strength from the generators without sending pain or fatigue signals back. This will relieve Colonel Austin of the normal fatigue one would feel after extremely strenuous activity. As with the removal of the arm, it's essential to remove the healthy eye for optimum binocular performance. When required, the bionic eyes will capture and crystallize images up to 1 mile in distance with full photo and video capture. Maximum range is approximately 3 miles with built-in tracking and targeting systems that allows for pinpoint accuracy. Colonel Austin's face will now be completely malleable. Using encoded DNA structures of over 300 facial types and time-release skin toners, the Visage Modification Enhancer will allow Colonel Austin to change the shape and color of his face at will. Identity can be altered to resemble a wide variety of types and ethnicities. The new epidermis can withstand pressures of 400 pounds without puncture. The skin will be flame resistant and easily replaceable. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you build a bionic man. Steve has awoken from the surgery. He looks at himself in the mirror and puts his right arm on the mirror and taps it with his finger and breaks it. Haven't you had enough bad luck lately? Oscar says as he walks in. You're going to have to learn how to be more careful with things. They took my good arm, Steve says. They had to, Oscar says, to compensate for the robotics. Steve interrupts. Bionics, Oscar says. Is there any of me left? This is you, Steve. Steve says, well, there's nothing to indicate that I've lived through the crash. No one would ever know. But some of us will never forget, Oscar says. I wanted those scars as a reminder of who I was, what I survived. I'll never have the scars again. I'm without blemish. Perfect. Well, perfect people don't complain this much, Oscar says. Steve says, I wish they had left something of me behind. Why don't you try going on safari, Biwana? Oscar says to Steve. Steve turns around, lifts up his shorts, and sees the scar that looks like Africa on his backside. Steve looks into the mirror and smiles. So now's the time to test Steve's new abilities. The lead surgeon tells Steve, Steve, we're going to be testing your speed today. The course is laid out with markers along the trail. We're going to be able to monitor your heart rate and velocity with the devices you're wearing. So just relax, take it easy at first. When you feel comfortable, pick up the pace, but don't overdo it. This is just a trial run. So Steve nods in agreement, and he starts running. Heart rate normal, Rudy says. He's doing fine. Speed, 5 miles an hour. Oscar walks up, looks at the computer. He says, what's that noise? This sounds like a spring or something. And the lead surgeon says it's probably feedback pulses from the mini nuke generators. It says even shielded, the radiation can interfere with his onboard phone. So Steve continues running. He's past the first marker. How's he doing? Everything is normal. He's up to 10 miles an hour, an Olympic marathon pace. Heart rate hasn't jumped at all. Interesting, Oscar says. So Steve picks up the pace. 10 minutes in, and he's up to 15 miles an hour. Then Steve runs faster. 30 miles per hour. That monitor okay? Oscar says. Then Steve makes it up to 45 miles an hour. Is that possible? Oscar says. Lead surgeon says we were expecting 25, 30 tops, and his heart rate hasn't jumped. That's because he's expending very little energy, Rudy says. The bionics are doing all the work. His cardiovascular isn't even being taxed. As far as his body's concerned, he's doing nothing more than strenuous walking. He's better, stronger, faster. Steve and Oscar are now in a conference room. And Oscar asks Steve, how do you feel, Colonel Austin? Sore. Rudy and Killian should be brought before the Hague before torturing me like this. Well, give the scientist a new toy, Oscar says. Oscar walks to Steve and looks over at him and says, Steve, I can't tell you how glad I am that... Steve says, I know, and I thank you. What you've done for me is nothing short of amazing. But I'd like to know why. You were always a perceptive guy. Steve, it is our hope that you will come work for us at o.s.i. Steve looks up surprised at Oscar. You're o.s.i? I'm sure you've heard many rumors about what we do at o.s.i, and some of them are probably true. Well, most of them are probably true. We were created after Kennedy was assassinated. We were set up to police and oversee our government's own various covert agencies. And we did just that. Sometimes we were effective. Sometimes we weren't. But we found ourselves to be most effective in world politics. In areas of world politics where the CIA and NSA couldn't even make moves without creating international incidents. We made sure that men like these came to a quick end. We've never been detected. We've never dropped the ball. Steve looks over at Oscar and says, the kind of stuff you're dealing in, I sure hope not. I'm not one to lie to you, he says. It's pretty cloak and dagger stuff. Spying, Steve says, in this day and age? We call it preemptive defense. Diffusing potential problems before they come just that. And do you think I fit the profile? Asks Steve. Well, let's just say I'm glad someone with your abilities is on our side, Oscar says. Is there some sort of secret handshake you're supposed to teach me here? So you're in, Oscar says, just like that. Any questions? Only one question, Steve says. What's the next mission, sir? That will do it for issue number 4. Steve is now finally bionic. Now, maybe next issue, we'll find out what Hull is up to. So, please subscribe and like my channel. Come back next time for issue number 5. And until next time, let's keep it classified.